This is a very difficult subject because it's very emotional and it's not abstract, it's not intellectual, it's not theoretical, although as well. And it's a subject that I've been dealing with throughout my life, especially in the last 20, 30 years ago, last 20, 30 years. My parents were from Poland. I was born in Paris, France, before the war began, the war being Second World War, not Korea, not Vietnam, etc. And I was in hiding during the war with a Christian family, and my mother was hidden in a different location. And so I didn't have a Jewish identity. So in terms of transference of trauma and narrative and victimhood, right away I became acquainted with those issues, but not consciously. When I returned to my mother right after the war, I was about 7.5 years old. That's when I learned that I was Jewish, and I think that's when the transference of trauma began, because her family and my father's family had been destroyed in Poland. So we're talking about extended families, the way we think in the United States of extended families. She had 11 brothers and sisters, and nephews and nieces, and there are some photographs of them. And these types of images, when we're talking about trauma, are very important because they tell a whole story. So when seeing these images of her relatives, my relatives, was a very emotional experience. We came to the United States in 1950. My father was killed in the war, and there's very little about his family history. And in the Jewish community, the war, the Holocaust, of course, is a major trauma. But there were traumas before that in the Jewish world, in the tribe. The traumas began when, you might say, the Jewish people were sent into exile in Babylonia in around, I think, 600 of the Christian era. And that occurred. That's history. And we're told that in the synagogues all the time. When I pray and I read the English, and I do go to, I mean, this is about religion, we're talking about religion and trauma. When I go to the synagogue, which I do, which is the conservative synagogue, and I read the English text, this is the transference of trauma, of our oppression, our losses, the first temple, the second temple, that's history. The being thrown out of Jerusalem, the land of Israel. And then the reading about the rabbis. We were in the diaspora. And among the Jewish people, it's just a history of loss. Loss mostly under Christian rule. The irony is that in our community today, we don't, I mean, there's a lot of ignorance in the Jewish community about our presence in the Islamic world. And our presence in the Islamist world was always of a somewhat positive nature. Compared to the Christian world, we were accused of killing Jesus and deicide to this day. Regardless of what the Vatican said in '62, in many communities in Europe, it's still deicide. So in terms of what's going on today in the Middle East, in Jewish-Arab relations, we are in some ways very ignorant and continue to see ourselves as victims in Israel, Palestine, that the world wants to destroy us, especially and that's the narrative in the Jewish community today, especially among my friends who are also Holocaust survivors. There's about 35 of us in Detroit, and we meet periodically, monthly, and each time we meet, that kind of narrative comes out. They want to kill us, they've always wanted to kill us, and the Arabs hate us, and I said, well, wait a minute, what, you know, it hasn't always been like that, and we did pretty well on the Islamic rule. They go, no, they've always, and then, of course, you know, it wasn't, and then you have certain images that come up. One that's come up recently that triggers and that reinforces this kind of fear. And the image being the Mufti of Jerusalem, and I forgot what year it was exactly, when he met with Hitler. So we have this image of Hitler meeting with this Arab, and of course that means they're, you know, Nazis, fascists, etc., etc. Of course, it's taken out of context that in those days the British were the colonialists, and of course the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and where would Arabs, Muslims turn to except the enemy of the British, who happened to be German, Hitler. When I came to the United States, the transmissive trauma continued. Jews were always victims, in terms of continuation, the passing on of that kind of trauma and victimhood, I see it today in this, what we call the second generation. So the second generation of Holocaust survivors are the children of very often the people who were in the camps. And there's a kind of a difference. Those of us who were children in those days, our children seem to be pretty much okay in terms of identity. In terms of American identity, Jewish identity. My own kids, I'm not sure how much traumatized they've been by my own experiences, by their grandmother, I'm not sure. But for sure, the children of the camp survivors, even though they did not experience the Holocaust themselves, they've experienced the memories of their parents. And it's been very difficult for them to this day because, and they continue to see themselves in many ways as victims. I think maybe I will, I mean, I've got some other comments that I could make, but maybe I will, I'll leave it at this for now. I would just say that there's also a very interesting element of selective, I call it selective victimhood. And I see it in our own community, where we're very focused on our own sense of victimhood, and we don't see the other. Let me just say something about that. We have a really hard time seeing the other. We have hardly any communication with the Muslim community, hardly any communication with the African American community, living in the suburbs, you know, West Bloomfield. It ain't like New York where you kind of see people visually. And so it's very hard for us to put ourselves in the feet of, you know, and we still have this image that when we showed up after the Holocaust in Israel, there was nobody there, right? But slowly but surely we're learning that there were people there, and that's the other image of, that's the mirror image of the narrative. But when we have our discussions, it doesn't, we don't have this type of, you know, empathy for the other, and we're not good at that. So I think I'll just leave it at that. We'll talk some more later.
Okay.